Our TRAX is sponsored by Polaris, think outside. Can-Am, time for some off-road living. And by Yamaha, revs your heart.
So one of the big questions you guys ask us, we get asked constantly, is to compare vehicles. What is this one compared to this one? How do they stack up? And we have been wanting to do this comparo for a long time because these are very, very comparable vehicles. We've got a General 1000 XP, and we have got RMAX. This is a sport. You've been dying to hear how the RMAX goes against the General. Here they are. We're gonna finally give you what you've asked for.
These two vehicles are almost identical, so let's just go over specs really quick, because while they're not, I mean, this is a sport, this is a deluxe. We realize that's not the same vehicle as this, but down underneath all the plastics and the extra stuff, we've got almost identical weight, 1,845 pounds wet. This is 1,690, so arguably probably the RMAX is the slightest bit lighter. 600 pound box capacity, 600 pound box capacity. 1,500 pounds of towing, 2,000 pounds of towing. Actually, when it comes to all of these specs, the RMAX has the Polaris up just a little bit. 16.9 inches of travel in the rear, 14 point something in the front, 14 all the way around. So I think the RMAX is just a little bit specced up, and that's probably because Yamaha
used that as a benchmark. They went, hey, let's build a General, but let's make everything just a hair better.
Yeah, they're both 999 cc's.
They both have 30-inch tires.
Both have 30-inch tires. The Polaris comes with 15s, but I think maybe if you go to a lesser model, it's probably 14s. Yep. And the reality is, they're probably similar in horsepower. Yamaha doesn't give us their horsepower spec. They don't say what the number is. Polaris says it's 100 horsepower. I think they're both pretty similar. So really all the way around, even the suspension. While the RMAX does have high and low speed compression adjustability, the Polaris only has one.
But that's just because this is the sport model.
Exactly.
So if you went down the next level or went to an XTR or a Limited, this would have basically, it would have QS3s, and this has walkers. There's 16 clicks, I think, of compression, which is basically just a glorified QS3. It's just compression, that's all.
There's high arched A-arms all the way around in the Polaris, where the
This
Yamaha
one doesn't
only
have it in the rear. Yep, just straight arms in the rear, arched in the front.
Yeah. The Yamaha is 2 inches wider, so it's 66 inches versus 64. Really? I mean, I think this is the perfect shootout, so what are we going to talk about first?
Well, I think we need to talk about how does it ride, because these two vehicles, handling is important, but handling is more important in a razor class, right? Where people are going wide open. Now you can run these things hard. We've proved that many times over, but I think more important than anything would be like ride and ergonomics, riding comfort. And in terms of ride quality, that's where this becomes more difficult, because this is a sport, so it's stiffer.
It is.
We've ridden all the RMAXs. I've ridden the Limited with the Fox suspension and everything, and I can say that in my opinion, the Polaris provides a plusher ride. Now that translates into a little bit more body roll.
It does body roll more,
but it soaks up the small stuff and the big stuff, in my opinion, better than the RMAX does, even in a more plush model.
I think if you were a guy who was riding at Moab, maybe you rock crawl all the time, that's what you love, or you plan to put a big set of mud tires on, I think the RMAX, it's perfect the way it's set up for it. But if you want to go out everyday ride and you're looking for plushness, probably on all levels of RMAX, I've found them to all be slightly stiffer than the General. So
and what you said about rock crawling is a great point, because we did rock crawl with this,
and it's awesome.
It's amazing at rock crawling.
Better than the General, for sure.
Better than the General. And the other thing it has, actually, that's something to consider, this is more ergonomics, but it has better sight lines than the General when you're sitting in it. So when you're rock crawling or running through mud, trail riding of any kind, you can see out in front of you a lot better than in the General. So
they're very different in that regard. When you move inside the cab, and here's the other thing, while we don't get to put thousands and thousands of miles on vehicles because the manufacturers ask for them back, this one has 615-ish kilometers on it. This one has 680.
They're almost identical.
We have put some miles on these. These are being ridden quite a bit. So, you know, yes, they're not 4 years old, but this is just the way that it is. We've experienced some things interior-wise. I actually really like the Yamaha's interior. They have soft touch points, like where your knee rests up against areas, where your elbows are resting. There's all these little soft pads that after a full day of riding and bouncing around when you're really ripping, or rock crawling
for
especially.
Your knees. Those two pads for your knees are like so smart.
Yeah, even your elbow sitting on the armrest, it's soft and it's cushy. It's just those small things that are nice.
There's also more space.
There's way more
space. When you sit in the RMAX, and the way I judge it is steering wheel to chest, basically. The RMAX, I have way more space between the steering wheel and my chest I can stretch out. In the General,
it's tighter.
The seat is all the way back and I feel like I'm cramped. Now that doesn't translate into leg space. I got lots of leg space in both. But in terms of physical space between the dashboard and my body, The RMAX feels way bigger.
Yeah, I like the feel of that. I like the elbow room. I like the shoulder room in it.
Now,
I don't like the door. I would prefer that the door be full height and you get rid of the little shoulder armrest piece.
I hate that thing.
I know. They have it there for safety, and I've been explained as to why it's there. I get it. I would just prefer that the door be up at that height and come all the way across. Yes, that would change
Like in this. The General's a prime example how the door goes up where the shoulder bolster.
I think it would just look cooler. Honestly, it would. Functionality, they both work just fine, but it would look better.
And it would be more comfortable.
It would be, yeah, I think it would be nice.
Now, speaking of comfort, we kind of differ in this. I prefer the seats in the General.
Yep.
They're plush and soft and cushy, and I just feel like I'm sinking into them, and I really like them. And I like the seating position in the General a little bit better, but you're definitely partial to the RMAX.
I like the bolstering, the way it fits,
the positioning.
Yeah, it fits me a bit better. But again, that's showroom preference. Everybody's going to have something different that they like, but they're both all-day comfortable in my opinion. Yep. I think you can ride these all day, and there's not one or the other that really shows too many signs of something being, uncomfortable or awkward or weird.
Dirt Trax is sponsored by MBRP Performance Exhaust, built for the victory lap.
I think one of the biggest hallmarks after 600 kilometers and then after 6,000 kilometers, what does the vehicle sound like when you ride it down the trail?
Goodness. And that is such a huge difference.
It is.
This is the important part that you mentioned, that these are similar kilometers, very, very close. Because the difference in noise, vibration, and harshness between these two vehicles after 600 and arguably 50 kilometers is it's night and day.
It's polar opposites.
Yep. The RMAX feels just like the day you brought it home. It doesn't have any rattles, it doesn't squeak, nothing. It feels just like it was built yesterday. But the General, now I will say, when the General was brand new, it had rattles and squeaks, but it has a lot of rattles and squeaks right now.
Yeah,
it sounds like it's got a couple thousand kilometers on it versus a couple hundred. So,
and I appreciate the fact that Japanese Yamaha, fit and finish and high level of quality, even after almost 700 kilometers or 650 kilometers, it's still very tight. There really is no rattles, squeaks. Even the doors themselves don't squeak, and pretty much every other manufacturer, the doors squeak after that many kilometers, and you got to readjust them. This thing sounds great. It works great, and so that's good. When it comes to engine, we're going to do something at the end. But what else? What else do you think we should kind of reference here? Because really, I mean, I find ground clearance on both of these to be acceptable.
It's within like half of an inch,
it's
right?
Like half of an inch difference.
Yeah, like that doesn't even matter. That's the difference between having a cheeseburger and not in the morning.
Yeah, the Polaris has high arched rear A-arms, so maybe it's a bit better, but then the RMAX has overall better ground clearance, so maybe it's a bit. You throw a sheet over both of them.
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And of all the riding I've done on both, I've never come to a point where I was like, oh, this one hit that rock and that one didn't.
Exactly.
They hit the same rocks and they crawl over the same stuff. It's the same thing.
So I think probably when it comes down to it, everybody wants to know about power. How's the power?
Well, there's a couple things that we could talk about that's motor related, but isn't.
Yeah.
This has multi-modes. They work great.
Yep.
They really do. Now, sport is a little too sporty in our opinion. Trail is much more usable.
Yes.
But rock or the crawl mode is
very beneficial
phenomenal.
crawling.
Works great. This only has one mode, and it's fine. I find it to be clutched very well, and it's very smooth. But you don't have that option, and with the RMAX, you do have that option. Now, they both have very similar 4x4 systems. However, this has a full locking front diff.
It does.
With a button. This is Polaris's, on-demand four-wheel drive, which locks almost immediately, but it is not technically a fully locked front diff. There is one other small point that you got to talk about, and it's accessories. Polaris has a list of accessories that it just continues on and on and on into the apocalypse. There's nothing but accessories for this. Yamaha has lots of accessories, but nowhere near as many. And their integration system isn't as good with
other things. Like if you want the integrated 7S touchscreen display with GPS and stereo, you can. I mean, Polaris is pretty much the only company right now.
Just buy the Ultimate. That's all you do.
Yeah, exactly. Buy the Ultimate. It comes equipped. Yamaha does have a GPS that you can mount in the dash, but it
comes on the Limited.
Yeah, it's not as seamless. And between Canada and the USA, there's a lot of differences in model names and what comes on them. So you really have to check the manufacturer's website for your country.
I love these two vehicles. I love driving both of them. I have no complaints about either. I've put a lot of miles on both. I mean, I've spent days in the RMAX and have nothing bad to say about either of them. So what you said earlier, it is a lot of personal preference is what it comes down to. There are some bonuses here, bonuses there, but I would put them very, very competitive and almost equal. The next part is what we know you guys want most, what we've been curious about most for the longest time,
we're
and we can finally do it. So
we're gonna drag race them and see which one's faster, see which one accelerates better.
Let's talk about how we're gonna set them up so they can be the same and everybody knows how they're set up. Are we gonna start in 4-wheel or 2-wheel?
I think if we're doing a drag race, it's got to be four-wheel drive.
Okay,
just
so
due to the
four-wheel
fact that it
unlocked
takes
in
off
this,
better.
but four-wheel drive.
Yeah, I think that's best, just because it takes off better.
Okay, and we're gonna obviously have this in sport mode.
Yeah, and this will be in standard mode.
In mode
It'll
only.
be on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Besides that, suspension is set up the way it came from the dealership.
Yep.
No change from there because that's how the manufacturer sends it, and we want to test it the way they send it.
Yep.
So I don't think we're gonna change anything. Tires obviously are stock. Yeah, from there, let's see what's faster.
Dirt Tracks is sponsored by Princess Auto. Make it work.
That was so close, I think we should just do it again.
Yeah?
There was literally no difference. Like, the Yamaha was just inching away at the end.
I wouldn't say there was more than like half a kilometer an hour difference at the top
I know.
speed.
Yeah.
But like acceleration and straightaway speed was exactly the same.
I think we took off exactly like the same time. I didn't feel like I got ripped off in any way. Well, let's try one more time and see, because that was the closest race I've ever seen with a side-by-side.
That one was weird.
You were faster.
Yeah, why?
I don't know, should we do it again?
Probably.
Yeah, unless as they're coming up to temp, this gets a bit heat soaked and starts to slow down, which could happen.
I mean, that was only one run.
Yeah, but we drove out here, which is a little ways, so I mean, we might as well try again and see if it gets progressively better for the Yamaha. Cool.
So that was
definitive.
more than a little bit interesting.
Yeah.
Our first run, I think, is a throwaway.
Yeah, the
first
vehicles
run
weren't
was-
up to temp.
Yeah, just that was a surprise, but it wasn't the truth.
But you still finger walked at the end away from me.
For sure. But after that, the third, fourth, fifth, whatever, the rest of the runs, it wasn't even close. Like
Every single time you're
RMAX
right
is a
out
lot
of the
faster.
hole. I would say the first 50 feet were identical.
Yep.
And then you just creep out. So
Yep.
I mean, maybe it's geared slightly different. I would say out of the hole, they both take off exactly the same. That's like, we can't argue that. They're
Nope.
identical. But the RMAX has longer legs, and if it's straight shot, you're going to beat me every time.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Honestly, I'm surprised.
And out of the hole, I thought maybe the Polaris was going to be a bit quicker, like kind of lurching forwards and would take off a bit. And it doesn't. The RMAX is equally as
when
fast.
you and I hit the throttle at the same time, it was 100% equal. Like you said, I would go a little further, probably about 100 feet, and then the RMAX just rolls away. And I can actually watch you in my rear view mirror as I'm pulling away. It's not like it's a little bit, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely like, by the time we get down there, it's like 3 to 5 vehicle lengths.
That's the definitive result. There's no arguing that. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Four-wheel drive for both, and I was in sport mode. That's it.
And you know what? Again, with the same story, if you were to benchmark something, you'd want it just to be just a littlest bit faster.
Than the original. Yeah.
Yeah. So Polaris needs to put a turbo in general.
And then all of a sudden, it'll be faster
That's right.
magically.
Yeah. So
I don't know. It really brings to light, like, you know, maybe it's time for the General to have a little bit of an overhaul. It's still a great vehicle. There's no question. It does a lot of things well. Does some things better than an RMAX.
Yep.
But the RMAX, I think the number of things the RMAX does better than the General, for you and I, put the RMAX maybe one step above. That might not be for everybody, but for you and I.
Yeah, I'm actually very impressed with the RMAX. I would gladly and happily buy one of those vehicles and be completely content with it.
Yeah.
After 680 or 650 kilometers, I'd be equally as content with it. So
It'd be nice if Yamaha gave us a screen in Canada.
Yeah. It would. You know what? There's room for improvement on both sides, but
for sure.
the RMAX is definitely doing a great job. So props to Yamaha. I think it's pretty definitive. They win.
Dirt Tracks has been sponsored by Hercules Tire, ride on our strength. Tire Jet, full tire protection and permanent seal. And by Mad Ramps, leave the trailer and go.
We have tested a lot of different Defender models here at Dirt Tracks over the years, and I would actually say we've tested pretty much all of them except the new HD7 and HD9s. Those ones came out last year and we haven't been able to get our hands on one just yet. So because I was so curious about how the HD9 performed, we actually contacted a friend of the show, a local rancher, and he told us he'd let us borrow his brand new HD9 to go out and find out what we think about it and how it performs. After spending a bit of time with this Defender HD9, this is an XT package. There's been a few things about it that's really stood out to me, and the first one is how quiet it is inside this cab. Can-Am has done a phenomenal job of keeping engine noise down and also mechanical noise, rattles, squeaks, things like that. Smoothness also translates into things like power delivery. So the HD9 has got a 976cc V-twin. It makes 65 horsepower and it is buttery smooth. It is so smooth. When you want the power, it'll take off and go. The motor is just beautiful in this vehicle. Really, maybe one of my favorites. The suspension is absolutely fantastic. We've been ripping around a farm, we've been running some trails. Pretty much everywhere I've taken it, it's given me a really, really smooth ride. No harshness, no spots where you're being bounced around. They are just twin tube gas shocks. There's nothing special about the suspension on this XT model. Preload adjustable, of course, on the springs, but the shocks are just basic models and they work really well. Overall interior comfort is great in this vehicle. I have really nothing to complain about. The seat's comfortable, the steering wheel's adjustable, everything is in easy reach. The shifter being up here in the front is great, and it shifts really nice. The shifting is precise, it's smooth. I like that it has a detent when you go forward into reverse. There's a gate there, so you can slam it into reverse and then you can drop it down into low for plowing. It has its own gate as well. So it's really an easy system to use for utility purposes that way. I would like it if high had a gate as well, but that's a small point to make and not something I'm going to complain too much about. This is not a press unit. This is a vehicle that a friend of the show, Alex, let us borrow. This one has some personal touches that he put on: the rear windscreen, the half windshield, the mirrors, that kind of stuff. But this is an XT package and it does come with a lot of really nice features. I'm really impressed with the platform. It does everything you want it to do. It doesn't leave anything to be desired. They're durable. They're a really high quality build. You've got great capacities for cargo and hauling. And when you combine all those things together, the utility aspects of this Defender are phenomenal.
My name's Alex Kofofsky and I sell fire trucks. This is my weekend fun. We decided to break away from the everyday norm and follow our passions. Horses are something that we absolutely love. Hope Ranch Retreat has started for multiple reasons. We wanted to give other people the experience of horseback riding, ridership, and as well to get out in nature. So why I decided we needed a side-by-side is knowing that we have so many acres, distances we got to travel, hauling hay, hauling water, hauling grain and food, checking fences. There's a lot of ground to cover. So the reason why I decided to choose the Can-Am Defender is because a lot of what we do is needing something where more than one person's going to be with us. We looked at all the other options out there, decided the robustness of the suspension, the roominess, the power. We do a lot of pulling and hauling, and we just needed something that was going to do the job and be up to our task. So the reason why we decided on the HD9 versus the HD10 was we didn't feel that the 82 horsepower was something that we quite needed. We felt that 65 was more than adequate. For everything we've done, it's proven itself time and time again. When we looked at the other brands of side-by-sides, the HD9 had more than enough power on an engine-to-engine basis. Dollar for dollar, I felt this was a better value for us. It came with standard features which the competitors didn't. I had to add all those features, which was going to bring that price up. At the end of the day, we're still trying to be budget friendly for ourselves. Why I think you should buy an HD9? Simply, I feel that the value's there, the robustness, the everyday utilitarian, but it's also a lot of fun. We get out, the kids love going out in the fields, going out for an afternoon, going for a trail ride, setting up, having a campfire, sitting around, doing the tasks around the farm. It's been absolutely the best decision that we made.